Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. The meta is in a pretty diverse spot right now, and strategies are being constantly formed by the highest players, and some really interesting strategies are coming out. Today I talked to streamer and Canada coach Jayne to talk about different strategies that have been formed in Korea and other places in the contender scene that may become meta and why. And all of this is leaning towards an unblockable and kind of uncounterable meta that might be coming up. But without further ado, let's get started. For any people that may be living under a rock, may you introduce yourself and let us know who you are and why should people listen to you when it comes to talking about Overwatch.
Well, hello viewers of Overwatch Central. My name is Jayne. I am a educational Twitch streamer, and I suppose I have a YouTube channel too, but I'm primarily on Twitch. I do VOD reviews, OWL analysis, as well as other educational stuff to do with high-level competitive Overwatch. I am also the head coach for Team Canada this year during the World Cup, so hopefully you're cheering for Team Canada, and if not, we welcome all defectors from other nations to cheer for the lovely northern country.
I'd say we're in the Commonwealth on that one, because we're not sort of running into you in the group stages, so...
Yeah, exactly. Well,
at least I'm extending an olive branch.
We're going to be friends until BlizzCon, we'll call it that. I'll cheer for you if you cheer for me.
That I'm okay with that. Let's get it. Anyway, so certainly the highest tiers, the meta has always been evolving since Brigitte has been added into the game. To snipers, Orisa's come back in a big way. All of these different strategies. So kind of what's next? What are you seeing a lot of looking at contenders or other teams and other strategies that you feel is going to be the sort of future of the game to an extent?
Well, everyone's familiar with the dive comp, the death ball comp, and the double sniper comp, or any comp like that. You can kind of refer to them as pick compositions because they do operate off individuals getting picks or winning their matchups in 1v1s. But in Contenders, we have seen some teams kind of testing the waters with some more experimental compositions. And a couple of these teams all seem to be working towards the same general goal. And I assume not a lot of people have actually noticed this going on, which will be it'll be fun to talk about, I suppose. But
so what's the goal? I guess is the main question.
What's the goal here? Do I want to give it away right away? It's kind of like a variant of goats and dive. And I don't mean the fact that it's just a 6-man dive party or anything like that. We've seen variants of that before. The Gladiators Legion, they're very aggressive kind of 6-man, all-in, balls to the wall style. Am I allowed to say that? I hope so.
That's fine, yeah.
They're balls to the wall style. We've seen 6-0 compositions before. And I don't mean 6-0 as in 6 tanks or 6 DPS. I mean, usually in that regards, I'm referring to the number of frontliners and the number of backliners. So Goats, which is the composition named after the Contenders Trials team, has 3 tanks, the Reinhardt, the Zarya, and the D.Va, and then 3 supports, which is the Brigitte, the Lucio, and the Moira. Some teams are now running a Zenyatta over the Moira, but Pedantex, really. So that team composition, the Goats comp is 3-3 in terms of composition, but it's got 6 frontliners because there is nobody in the back, whereas a composition, for example, like Winston, D.Va, Tracer, Widowmaker, Mercy, and Zenyatta, you would have that back line being the Mercy, the Zenyatta, and the Widowmaker playing back, not actually diving in, whereas the D.Va can either be forward with the Winston Tracer or back protecting the back lines. The newer composition that we're seeing is more of like it's not really dive, but it is run with dive tanks, or more specifically, one dive tank, and it's run with Winston. But this composition doesn't really dive. It has the mobility, but it runs at people in the same way that a Goats composition does. So just a few examples, kind of one of the first variants on the Goats composition that we saw run in this style actually came in from O2 Ardiant. And I believe, unless I'm wrong, it was in a game against 7 in Korean Contenders. And this composition ran Winston, Rein, Zarya. So that was the tank lineup, was Winston, Rein, Zarya.
And that's pretty unorthodox because that's 2 main tanks, right? Usually triple tanks is 2 off tanks.
It's 2 main tanks, right? And if you run into that in ranked, you're going to be like, wow, we're throwing. Can we not have 2 main tanks, right? And then they have the Zarya. And then their support lineup, I'll give you kind of 5 seconds to try and guess what you would run as a support lineup with this. Ding, ding, ding. You're right. The answer was Brigitte, Lucio, and Ana.
Perfect. Nobody could have guessed that, really.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So already you could be like, what the heck is going on here? And this is Korean Contenders. This isn't like Chinese Contenders or Australian Contenders. This is...
I refrain from that. As a caster from Chinese Contenders, I cannot take that kind of slack, but do go on.
But, these guys are serious about this composition. So the first thing that when you're kind of an analyst and you're looking at this composition, and of course, right now, I'm not sure if you'll be showing a clip of them playing this, but the good part is that when you do get to see this composition, you get to see how they play around it. And again, the next thing that I'm going to ask, I suppose I'll give you a few seconds to kind of work out here, but what is the other similarity between Winston and Reinhardt? The way they apply their damage is similar between Winston and Reinhardt.
Barriers can't block it.
Barriers can't block it, and also defense matrix can't block it. So this is kind of a giveaway here, but we're looking at ways in which damage can be applied in which it can't be blocked.
So you've sort of spoken about a really good example of that strategy with O2 Ardian, but even in like different regions of the world, that strategy is being played kind of the same, but also very differently.
Yeah, so without the Rein Zarya thing, we have seen variants of this, and Gladiators Legion, I suppose, in terms of a playstyle, and we've seen this with their composition that they've run a couple of times with the Soldier, Winston, D.Va, Brigitte, Lucio, Moira. This is, again, the same supports that we see from a traditional GOATS composition with the very powerful healing of Brigitte, Lucio, Moira. Then we're adding even more utility healing with the Soldier, but the Soldier, unlike, having the Winston and the Rein, is that they aren't really very good in terms of the Winston and Rein can both go through barriers and defense matrix, but Soldier can't. So he seems like a bit of an interesting pick here. One thing that he does have going for him is really good consistent damage. But one of the other things that he has for him is his Helix rocket, on top of his healing, that is. So Brigitte, what she can do is her 1 second duration stun with her shield bash can allow for a lot of burst damage here. So if they are going for a target that is trying to like get away or anything like that, and it's called that she's just 3, 2, 1 stunning or anything like that, that stun can have the Helix rocket applied to it as well. So we're having this kind of same concept of really high healing, very, very aggressive play style. But now we're kind of playing more around the burst and the stun itself. So O2 Ardian had their ability to go through shields, but now Gladiators Legion are playing a much higher damage, much higher healing composition, but also playing around Brigitte's stun and Soldier's Helix rocket. So we're seeing kind of like a different twist on the way that they're playing that composition. And then, if we're going back, so started at O2 Ardian and Korean Contenders, talked about Legion, now we're going back to Korean Contenders to talk about MVP Space. And their take on this meta, or this composition rather, I thought was even more interesting, and I think we're getting closer to what would be more considered the optimal way to play this strategy. So MVP Space, and this is where things get interesting, is they ran Doomfist. Doomfist, Genji, Winston, D.Va, Brigitte, Lucio. So they've now dropped one of their supports, and traditionally, Brigitte has been run with 2 supports. So we've normally see like Brigitte, Lucio, Moira, or more recently, Brigitte, Lucio, Zenyatta. But here we're seeing Brigitte, Lucio, the tank lineup being Winston and D.Va, and then the DPS lineup being Doomfist and Genji. And Doomfist is a very interesting character. He's very difficult to work around, and I don't think many teams have really been able to, I suppose, play him to his utmost yet. But Genji's Swift Strike, again, it absolutely cannot be blocked by anything. He can just Swift Strike and it will do 50 damage. Doomfist, his combo cannot be blocked by shields. His left click, like his Knuckle Shotgun, can be blocked out by defense matrix, but the rest of his combo cannot. Winston, same sort of thing. And D.Va, you could think would be used there for survivability, but Doomfist, Genji, and Winston, 3 characters all with damage that cannot be blocked by shields or defense matrix, at least, components of their kit cannot be blocked. And if you're adding that onto the Brigitte stun as well, then if you are able to get onto targets with this composition, you can just absolutely eviscerate them. So
yeah, I guess that's the sort of main area, is just like with this composition in a sort of like really succinct way, it's the whole idea of bursting down heroes with a stun and then damage that just cannot be blocked by anything that's available in the game, right? What is it for? Like, where would you play it? What does it counter? What counters it, I suppose? Where would you realistically pick up this comp?
Well, you definitely see this composition mostly on King of the Hill. So you don't want anything, really sustained, really back and forth, any kind of large objective-based warfare, anything that you do kind of need sustain. It's going to win one fight. It's not going to, on 2CP, like 2CP point B, for example, it's not going to be able to use offensively to be able to survive through opponents kind of respawning and trying to retake the point. It doesn't have any gigantic finisher combos or anything like that. It doesn't have a dragon. It doesn't have a nano blade. It doesn't have anything like that. It's just got to straight up burst people down. You're going to see these variants of these compositions played on things like Oasis and Ilios. You can't even really call it dive comp. It's more like rush comp.
I've heard the term rushdown used a lot for it, and this is certainly one of those areas. So I guess there is a trend between all of the sort of things that you've mentioned. Unblockable damage from shields or defense matrix, a stun, and all of these very aggressive DPS characters to burst out. Is it just basically that these comps are there to just completely counter D.Va?
Yeah, so D.Va's been a very, very powerful character for a very long time. Defense Matrix being unique in its ability to block so many different abilities on the opposing team, as well as it's not a damage-limited ability, right? It can block ultimates, it can block, theoretically infinite amounts of damage for the time in which it is active. And she's a very powerful character with vertical mobility, with a absolutely just gigantic amount of health, and even her shield break potential is really, really strong, especially with the micro missiles, and that, D.Va and Roadhog really aren't that different on paper in terms of their ability to break down Orisa shields, which is something that a lot of people don't really realize. So yeah, we are seeing these compositions that, whether intentional or not, are both strong without and strong against a D.Va, which is something, I suppose, unique to this meta that we haven't really seen. Not this meta, because it's not meta yet, but it is unique to this strategy or variance of this composition that we have not seen in recent memory.
And that's the main area, isn't it, really, that this is such an unorthodox strategy that's been run. You mentioned it not being meta there. Could it be? Is this like the strategy that we could be talking about over the next couple of months? Because, as you said, different areas of like Contenders and Overwatch is using it in very similar styles, but nobody's quite cracked it yet.
Could it be meta? Absolutely. We are also seeing a buff to hitscan as well. So, variants of Gladiators Legion rush composition with the Soldier Winston D.Va, that is going to be receiving a buff. So it's going to be even better against not only snipers, but also Pharahs, which currently dominate the meta, right? We're seeing double snipers, or we're seeing double snipers or sniper variants with Tracers, Brigidas, or Pharahs, or things like that. So Soldier and McCree both will be gaining benefits against those characters, which will already be kind of trending towards that area. But and then on top of that, we have the release of Hammond, and nobody really knows what Hammond is going to actually do to the meta. But one of the first things that teams are going to be looking at is, of course, the triple tank dive composition, where they're running Winston, D.Va, and Hammond, because all three of these tanks have vertical mobility, just like how Goats was very strong with their 3 tank, 3 support ground-based. Now we're going to have that same kind of terror of 3 tanks just descending on you, but they also have the ability to get to high ground. So maybe that's going to become the meta, but this composition, I think, really has... It's like the Genji of compositions. If you don't run it well, it's going to look silly and it's just going to fall apart. But this composition, if you're running something like, and one of the variants of this composition that I think would be the strongest is something like Doomfist, Winston, Brigitte, Lucio, Zenyatta +1. Whether that one is Reinhardt, Genji, or Soldier, to kind of like round out that composition. That combo of characters, which is actually with Doomfist, which is really cool, could be one of the highest skill cap compositions in the game, where you have the ability to contest people on the high ground, you have the ability to burst people down. On top of Brigitte's stun and Zenyatta's Discord, you have the ability to put so much unblockable damage onto a target that as long as you can get on top of it, which you can because you have Lucio, and a lot of your characters do have mobility, at least more of them do, than something like the Goats composition, then this composition has the ability to really, truly isolate and just delete characters instantly, regardless of who or where they are.
So, I guess finally to finish on then, just almost like TLDR of everything that we've gone over, this strategy, what it exactly wants to do, and finally, where can people find more from you?
Well, the TLDR is that the meta, even if you're feeling like the meta is stale, there are teams out there and there are games out there in which you can still find something new. Does it require a little bit of effort to go and find? Yes, but let's just say that the meta is not as stale as people would believe. As for where you can find more of me, I'm on Twitch primarily, twitch.tv/Jayne, Jayne, and that's where I primarily hang out. I'm also on YouTube, which I'm sure Ryan will be so kind as to put a link in the description. And then sometimes, if you can catch me on Twitter, I answer questions there as well. But thanks for watching, and thank you, Ryan, for inviting me on. I had a lot of fun.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Do let us know what you think of this meta, whether you think it's going to become more of a thing. It looks interesting, but it also looks terrifying at the same time, especially as a D.Va player myself. Be sure to check out all of Jayne's stuff in the description below, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, take care, we'll see you then.